January 1945. Cologne, Germany. The streets lay in ruins, ravaged by the war. Trams lie tilted, electric wires hang loosely, and smoke rises from the smoldering buildings. A Tiger Eye tank sits resolutely at the street corner, its turret slowly swiveling, searching for targets. Inside, the crew is relaxed, almost smug. It's just another Sherman. We've dealt with them before, the commander mutters. Out of the smoke, a shadow emerges, the M26 Pershing. Lower to the ground, its barrel longer, but without hesitation, it moves forward, not retreating. It's just a Sherman, the Tiger's crew thinks. They won't dare face us head-on. Bang! The first 90 millimeters shot from the Pershing strikes the front of the Tiger. Fire erupts, and the turret spins violently, shattered by the impact. Silence. No radio call. No order. Just the roar of the burning wreckage and the choking smoke that envelops everything. By January 1945, Germany was on the brink of collapse. After years of relentless fighting, the Third Reich was running out of resources, manpower, and time. The Allies had pushed deep into Europe, and the German forces, once dominant, were now scrambling to hold their ground. Fuel shortages, a lack of experienced pilots, and a battered economy had reduced Germany's ability to sustain its war machine. In the midst of this chaos, the Tiger Eye still held a legendary status. It was a symbol of German engineering superiority, the feared tank that had crushed Allied armor at every turn. To the German crews, it represented their last hope, a powerful machine that could stop any enemy in its tracks. The Tiger's 88 millimeters gun was unmatched in terms of firepower, capable of ripping through even the thickest armor of Allied tanks. To the German soldiers, the Tiger was their fortress on tracks, their last line of defense against the oncoming tide. But the situation on the battlefield had shifted. As the Allies advanced, so did their technology. The M26 Pershing, a new American heavy tank, had been deployed to the European theater. Initially, it was seen as just another upgrade to the Sherman, but it was far more. The Pershing's 90 millimeters gun, greater range, and superior armor made it a formidable foe, one that could stand toe-to-toe with the Tiger. What made the Pershing even more dangerous was the sheer scale of American production capabilities. While Germany's resources were dwindling, the United States could replace lost tanks faster than the Germans could destroy them. The situation was dire for the Germans. Their iconic tanks, such as the Tiger and Panther, were becoming increasingly expensive to build and difficult to maintain. Meanwhile, the Americans had found their answer: mass production. The Sherman tanks, though not as powerful individually as the Tiger, were produced in the tens of thousands. And now, the Pershing was arriving, a direct counter to the Tiger, designed specifically to address the weaknesses that had kept the Sherman at a disadvantage. For the Americans, this was a critical moment. The Battle of the Bulge, which had seen a last-ditch German effort to turn the tide, had failed. As winter gave way to spring, the Allies were pushing harder than ever. The Pershing was a part of that push, a symbol of American resolve and industrial might. The stakes were high. If the Pershing proved effective, it could pave the way for an end to the war in Europe. But if it failed, the Germans would have a fighting chance to hold on to their last remaining strongholds. At the same time, morale within the American forces was beginning to shift. The Sherman, while reliable, had always been a symbol of vulnerability. U.S. tank crews had fought bravely, but they knew the Sherman wasn't invulnerable. Its armor was thin, its gun was less powerful than the Tiger's, and its crews often had to make up for its shortcomings with sheer bravery. But with the arrival of the Pershing, there was hope that the balance could shift in their favor. The Pershing wasn't just a new tank, it was a statement of intent. The U.S. was no longer simply playing catch-up. They were ready to win. For the Germans, however, this shift in balance was devastating. They had relied on the Tiger for years, trusting its firepower and armor to keep the Allies at bay. But as they faced the Pershing in battle, the Tiger's once unassailable superiority was called into question. The reality was sinking in. The Allies were getting stronger, and the Germans were running out of time. The outcome of this encounter would be far-reaching. If the Pershing proved itself capable of defeating the Tiger, it would signal the beginning of the end for Germany. The Battle of Cologne wasn't just about one tank versus another. It was about the fate of a war that was already slipping out of German control. And for the first time in months, the German crew of the Tiger realized something they had never considered before: the battle might not be as winnable as they thought. The Tiger I was a technological marvel when it was first introduced, widely feared by Allied forces. Its 88mm gun could tear through nearly any tank in its path, while its thick armor made it almost impervious to most enemy fire. For German crews, it was the ultimate weapon on the battlefield, one that could strike fear into the heart of any Allied tank commander. But as effective as it was, the Tiger's size and weight came with significant drawbacks. In combat, the Tiger I's sheer mass made it slower than its lighter counterparts. While it could absorb hits that would incapacitate other tanks, it also had a much slower response time, particularly in urban or forested environments. Its engine was powerful, but it was prone to mechanical failures, and fuel shortages meant it often couldn't keep up with the rapid movements of the Allies. Despite these shortcomings, the Tiger I's reputation for invincibility had persisted until it met a new threat: the M26 Pershing. The M26 Pershing was designed to answer the challenge posed by the Germans' formidable heavy tanks. One of its primary advantages over the Sherman was its 90mm gun, significantly more powerful than the 75mm gun mounted on the standard Sherman. In terms of firepower, the Pershing's gun could penetrate the Tiger's armor at a distance of over 1,000 meters, something that the Sherman's gun simply couldn't achieve. But while the Pershing had the advantage in terms of firepower, it was more than just a larger gun that made it a threat to the Tiger I. The Pershing also offered a greater level of protection and maneuverability, something the Tiger could not match. The Pershing's armor was designed to withstand hits from enemy fire, with a sloped frontal plate that offered better protection against incoming rounds. The Tiger, in contrast, relied on thick vertical armor, which was effective against direct fire, but less effective against angled shots. When the Pershing's 90mm rounds hit the Tiger's sloped armor at an angle, they were far more likely to penetrate the steel. While the Tiger's armor could still withstand hits from lighter caliber weapons, it was no match for the Pershing's powerful gun, which could defeat it from ranges beyond where the Tiger's own gun could effectively return fire. The Pershing's maneuverability also gave it a key advantage in combat situations. While the Tiger was a powerful tank, its weight and size limited its ability to maneuver in tighter spaces, such as the streets of a bombed-out city like Cologne. The Pershing, although still a heavy tank, was much more agile. It could make tighter turns, navigate rubble-strewn streets with more ease, and reposition itself to gain better firing angles. The Tiger, on the other hand, was often caught in the open, unable to take advantage of cover or reposition in time. But the most significant difference between the two tanks wasn't just in their armor or firepower, it was in how they were supported. The M26 Pershing represented the best of American industrial might. The United States had learned from the shortcomings of its earlier tanks, particularly the M4 Sherman, which, despite being mass-produced, lacked the firepower and protection to compete with the Tiger. The Pershing was the answer to that problem. It combined superior firepower with sufficient protection and agility. On the other hand, the Tiger I was increasingly isolated. German production capabilities were strained. The resources needed to build and maintain the Tiger I were increasingly difficult to acquire, and Germany was struggling to produce the tanks in sufficient numbers. The American industrial machine, however, was in full swing. The U.S. could replace lost tanks almost as fast as they were destroyed, and the Pershing was being churned out to meet the growing demands of the war. For every Tiger lost, the Americans could replace dozens of Shermans and Pershings. For the Germans, however, each Tiger lost represented a critical blow to their war effort, one that they couldn't afford to replace in time. The tactical effectiveness of the Tiger I had been bolstered by its reputation. Its formidable firepower and thick armor made it the cornerstone of German tank tactics. But as the Allies introduced new, better-equipped tanks, the Tiger began to show its weaknesses. The Pershing was a significant threat not only because it could destroy the Tiger, but because it could do so while surviving in combat situations that would have left the Sherman vulnerable. The Pershing was designed to fight and survive in the kind of engagements that the Tiger I excelled in. As the Pershing advanced into the heart of Germany, the Germans quickly realized that their Tiger tanks, which had once dominated the battlefield, could no longer rely on their armor alone to guarantee survival. The M26 Pershing was the counter to the myth of the invincible Tiger. While the Tiger I might still have been a formidable weapon in the right hands, the Pershing represented the next generation of Allied tank design, one that was capable of outgunning, outlasting, and outmaneuvering the mighty Tiger. Inside the Tiger I, the atmosphere is thick with anticipation. The rumbling of the engine shakes the turret, reverberating through the crew's bones. They are in Cologne, a city torn apart by months of bombardment, but to the men inside this machine, it's just another fight, another enemy to crush. The crew sits in the familiar silence of combat, the weight of their steel beast around them, their senses sharp, waiting for the next engagement. Their hands are steady, their minds focused. After all, they've been through this before. We've killed Shermans before. Another one won't be different, the commander thinks, as he scans the ruins through his periscope, confident in his tank's superiority. The Tiger I is a legend, feared by all. The 88mm gun can tear through anything that stands in its way. No tank has been able to match it, and with each passing day, they're growing closer to victory. But then, the radio crackles with an order. Prepare to engage. The crew braces, knowing this will be another typical fight. They've faced dozens of Shermans and come out victorious. As the tank lumbers into position, the crew gets ready. The driver shifts gears, and the massive Tiger rolls forward with its heavy, almost indomitable power. Suddenly, there's movement. The gunner's eyes snap to the street corner where the shadows of enemy vehicles loom. His heart skips a beat as he catches sight of something not a Sherman. It's lower to the ground, with a longer barrel. It's coming straight at them. The crew's minds race. Is it another Sherman? No. Something feels different. The gunner's hands instinctively move to the sight controls, locking in a target. It's just another Sherman, the commander mutters, but his voice wavers slightly as the unfamiliar tank edges closer. It's just a Sherman. We've got this. Bang! The sound of the first shot is deafening. The shockwave rattles the crew, but what happens next sends a chill down their spines. The 90mm shell from the M26 Pershing crashes into the Tiger's thick armor with a force so violent, it's almost surreal. The turret jolts violently, the sound of metal screeching under pressure. What the hell? The commander barely manages to croak, unable to process the speed of the attack. The Tiger, the one's armor, once thought impenetrable, is now compromised. The flames burst from the gaping wound where the shell pierced through, and the entire vehicle shudders, throwing the crew off balance. Inside the turret, everything feels like it's in slow motion. The gunner grips the sight controls tightly, but his focus is lost. His hands feel numb as he watches the inferno grow. The heat is unbearable. The smell of burning fuel fills the air, stinging their nostrils. A thick layer of smoke fills the compartment, making it hard to breathe. The fire's intensity threatens to consume everything in its path. The gunner's first instinct is to call for help, but his voice cracks as he tries to speak. There's nothing to say. The Tiger is doomed. No escape, the gunner thinks, his eyes wide with disbelief. The crew's minds race, but it's too late. There's no time to react. The Tiger I, their mighty weapon of war, is no longer the fearsome monster it once was. Outside, the battlefield rages on, but inside the Tiger, there is only the suffocating silence of defeat. The engine is sputtering, and the once powerful tank is now a burning husk. The fire crackles, growing stronger as it consumes the remains of the crew's confidence, their belief in the invincibility of their machine. We've fought so many Shermans. How is this happening? The thought lingers, but it's fleeting. The truth is undeniable. The Tiger is no match for the M26 Pershing. The myth of the Tiger's invulnerability is shattered. The crew, once sure of their superiority, is now struggling to comprehend the shift in the battlefield. For the crew, it's not just the loss of their tank, it's the loss of their pride. The Tiger I was meant to be the backbone of Germany's tank corps, a symbol of their strength. And now, it's just another casualty of war. Outside the wreckage, the M26 Pershing looms like a ghost, a harbinger of the end. The crew watches helplessly as the battle continues, knowing they are no longer the ones in control. The Tiger, once a symbol of German might, is now a target. The Pershing, once underestimated, has proven its worth in the most brutal way possible. It's over, the gunner thinks as the flames consume the interior. The once great Tiger is nothing more than a pile of twisted metal, and with it, the myth of invincibility is gone. The crew understands, perhaps for the first time, that the war has truly turned. The Allies have evolved, and Germany's hopes of victory are fading fast. As the smoke clears, the crew sits in stunned silence. The realization is overwhelming. The war is slipping from their grasp, and there's nothing they can do to stop it. They were once the predators, but now they are the prey. The battle between the Tiger I and the M26 Pershing was more than just a clash of metal and firepower. It was a reflection of the larger systems at play in the war. The tanks themselves were the embodiment of two very different approaches to warfare, representing the contrasting industrial capabilities, logistical strategies, and tactical decisions of Germany and the United States. What unfolded on the battlefield was not only the destruction of a tank, but the collapse of a myth, a moment when Germany's reliance on superior technology collided with the overwhelming industrial might of the United States. American adaptability and logistics. The M26 Pershing's arrival in Europe was not an isolated event. It was the culmination of years of adaptation, learning, and industrial capacity that the U.S. military had developed over the course of the war. Early in the conflict, the M4 Sherman had been the mainstay of U.S. armored forces, but it became clear that it lacked the firepower to effectively counter the Tiger I. The Sherman's 75mm gun, while adequate for early engagements, couldn't penetrate the Tiger I's thick armor at longer ranges. The M4 Sherman was quick and reliable, but its design was a stopgap measure, a mass-produced tank that could be easily replaced but lacked the punch to take on the Tiger on equal terms. Recognizing this, the U.S. rapidly shifted its focus to developing a more capable tank, the M26 Pershing. Unlike the German approach of designing tanks like the Tiger I and Panther, with overwhelming firepower and armor, but limited production and logistical flexibility, the Pershing represented a balance between power, protection, and manufacturability. The Pershing's 90mm gun was specifically designed to defeat the Tiger I's formidable armor, and its thicker, sloped armor provided adequate protection against German fire. But perhaps most importantly, the Pershing could be produced in large numbers. The American industrial machine had been a key factor in the success of the Allies throughout the war. While Germany was constrained by resource shortages, particularly as fuel and raw materials became increasingly difficult to acquire, the United States was able to continually supply its forces with new tanks, aircraft, and artillery at a pace the Germans couldn't match. In fact, for every Tiger tank lost, the United States could replace multiple Shermans or Pershings in a fraction of the time. It wasn't just the Pershing's design that proved pivotal, it was the speed and scale of its production. The American war economy was able to produce thousands of tanks, trucks, and ammunition in a matter of months, thanks to the power of factories in Detroit and across the country. The Germans, on the other hand, were struggling to keep up. By 1945, Germany was facing severe shortages in fuel, trained personnel, and raw materials. Even with the Tiger I's fearsome reputation, it was becoming harder for the Germans to manufacture and field these tanks in sufficient numbers. In contrast, the M26 Pershing was just one piece of the vast industrial output that the United States could maintain, meaning that the Allies' ability to replace lost equipment far outweighed the Germans' capacity to do the same. The German dilemma: scarcity and stagnation. For Germany, the Tiger I was both a symbol of its technological superiority and a glaring weakness. While the Tiger was indeed a formidable machine, it came with significant limitations. The Tiger I was expensive to build and maintain. It required vast amounts of resources, including rare materials like high-quality steel and precision components, which were increasingly difficult for Germany to obtain as the war dragged on. The Tiger's 88mm gun was devastating, but its armor and size made it slow and difficult to maneuver in tight spaces, such as the streets of bombed-out cities like Cologne. As Germany's supply lines were cut off and fuel became scarce, the Tiger I became less effective. While German commanders had hoped that the Tiger could be a game-changer on the battlefield, its limited production meant that the Tiger wasn't as widespread as the Allies' own mass-produced tanks. The Tiger was an elite weapon, but it was also a rare one. For every Tiger lost, the Germans had little chance of replacing it in time. Germany's industrial base was stretched thin by the war, and it couldn't match the production rates of the Allies. The German military leadership had invested heavily in the Tiger I and the Panther tanks, but this investment came at a cost. The tanks were difficult to repair and maintain, requiring specialized parts and highly trained personnel. As the war continued, the Germans were forced to prioritize their most valuable equipment, often leaving their less advanced tanks to be sacrificed in combat. The Tiger I was too costly to be used as a cannon fodder in the way that the Sherman was for the U.S. military. This meant that German forces were becoming increasingly reliant on fewer and fewer tanks, and those tanks were less likely to make it to the battlefield intact. This was the German dilemma. They had invested in superior technology, but they couldn't sustain it. The Tiger I was a product of German engineering brilliance, but it was ultimately unsustainable in a total war. The American approach of mass production, combined with a flexible and adaptable war strategy, was proving more effective in the long run. The U.S. didn't need one perfect tank. They needed to field a large enough number of tanks to overwhelm the enemy, and that's exactly what they did. The tactical decision: innovation versus tradition. The strategic decisions made by both sides further influenced the outcome of tank battles. German tank tactics were often rooted in the philosophy of individual superiority. The Tiger I was built to be a killer, a solitary machine that could engage and destroy enemy units on its own. This belief in the superiority of individual equipment led to tactical approaches that focused on isolated engagements and waiting for the perfect shot. But this strategy worked only as long as the Tiger I was in good condition, and as long as there were enough Tigers to go around. With the M26 Pershing, the Americans didn't rely on any single tank to carry the burden. Instead, they could focus on overwhelming numbers and combined arms operations. The Pershing was a part of a larger mechanized force that worked together in tandem with infantry and artillery, offering an integrated approach that the Germans could not replicate. In contrast, the German decision-making process often focused on high-risk, high-reward tactics. The Tiger I was seen as a one-on-one powerhouse, but it was not as effective when the Germans were forced to fight in larger, multi-pronged engagements. The Germans' failure to adapt their doctrine to the realities of total war, where mass production, logistics, and innovation were key, ultimately led to their downfall. The Americans, with their industrial capacity and ability to innovate on the fly, were able to exploit these weaknesses. The end of the myth: industrial power and strategic shifts. The introduction of the M26 Pershing was more than just the deployment of a new tank. It symbolized the industrial power of the United States, which had managed to ramp up its production to levels that Germany simply could not match. The Pershing was the embodiment of American adaptability, capable of meeting the challenges posed by the Tiger I with superior firepower and production rates. For the Germans, the introduction of the Pershing meant the end of the Tiger's myth of invincibility. The Germans had built their hopes on the idea that their technological superiority would be enough to stave off the overwhelming resources of the Allies. But in the face of the Pershing, the Tiger and its legend were exposed for what they truly were: a powerful but unsustainable weapon in a war where numbers, adaptability, and production capacity were the deciding factors. In the end, the Germans had designed a tank that was too expensive, too rare, and too vulnerable in the face of an ever-growing American war machine. The M26 Pershing, mass-produced and well-suited to the demands of modern warfare, helped seal the fate of the Tiger I, marking a pivotal shift in the balance of power on the battlefield. The myth of German technological superiority was shattered, and the Pershing would be the one to carry the Allies to victory. In the dim glow of Cologne's shattered streets, the realization hit like a sledgehammer: the myth of the Tiger I was over. The once feared German tank, which had dominated the battlefield for so long, had been struck down by a force the Germans hadn't anticipated, a force they could no longer ignore. The Pershing, in its cold efficiency, had shattered the belief that Germany's superior engineering could outmatch the relentless industrial might of the Allies. For the German crew, the realization was sharp and brutal. As the Tiger I burned in the street, its hulking frame now a testament to the limitations of German engineering, the soldiers inside were left to grapple with the uncomfortable truth: they were no longer the predators. The war had shifted, and so had the power dynamics of the battlefield. The idea of the Tiger I As an invincible force, the monster of the battlefield had crumbled under the first wave of Pershing fire. And in that moment, the German tank crews knew the Tiger was no longer the apex predator of the battlefield. The Tiger I had been sold to them as the ultimate weapon, a tank capable of facing down anything the Allies threw at it. Its 88mm gun, thick armor, and seemingly impenetrable design had earned it a reputation that few could challenge. It was the monster, the tank, that could turn the tide of war in Germany's favor. But in that moment of explosive violence, the monster had been slayed. The Pershing's 90mm gun, with its devastating precision, had pierced through the Tiger's vaunted armor and reduced it to a burning husk. The truth was undeniable. The Tiger I wasn't invincible. It was a relic of a bygone age, a weapon that, while formidable, could not withstand the overwhelming power of the Allies' industrial capacity. The German crew inside the Tiger I watched in disbelief as their once proud machine was consumed by flames. Their minds raced, trying to comprehend the collapse of the myth they had been so indoctrinated with. They had believed the Tiger was the ultimate weapon, but now they were witnesses to its destruction. The myth was dead. They had fought for so long under the belief that their tanks were the best in the world, but now, with the Pershing's arrival, it was clear that their confidence had been shattered. "This isn't what we were told," the gunner thought bitterly, his hands still trembling as he surveyed the wreckage. "We were told that the Tiger would win this war." But now, the truth was evident. The Tiger I had become a liability. Its weight, its size, its mechanical complexity, all of it had become a disadvantage in the face of modern warfare. The M26 Pershing, with its simpler, more robust design, had made the Tiger obsolete. The Germans had designed a tank for a war that no longer existed, while the Americans had adapted to the realities of total warfare, bringing a tank that could not only fight, but survive the brutal conditions of the battlefield. The Tiger's reputation had been built on the battlefield of 1942 and 1943, but by 1945, it was already out of date. "We're not invincible anymore," the crew realized, and that was perhaps the hardest part to swallow. It wasn't just the loss of their tank, it wasn't even the immediate danger of the Pershing. It was the realization that the war had changed, and Germany had failed to keep up. The Americans had learned from their mistakes. They had evolved. They had adapted. And now, they were turning the Tiger's own myth against it. The Pershing was a tank designed to meet the challenge of the Tiger I, and it did so with brutal efficiency. The myth of German technological superiority, the belief that the Tiger was the last word in tank design, had been shattered. It was no longer enough to have the biggest gun or the thickest armor in modern warfare. The ability to adapt, to mass produce, and to overwhelm the enemy was the deciding factor. The American industrial machine had won. The Pershing, mass-produced and efficient, had proven that sheer industrial might and adaptability could outstrip even the most advanced technology. And in that moment, the Germans knew that their technological edge was gone. They had built their entire war effort on the idea of superior technology, but now that myth was exposed for what it was, an illusion. "We cannot keep up with this," the German commander thought, the weight of despair settling in. The Americans had learned, adapted, and evolved faster than they had anticipated. The myth of the Tiger was over, and with it, the German dream of a technological victory. The Germans had made their tanks too complex, too resource-dependent, and now, in the face of overwhelming American production and adaptability, the Tiger was nothing more than a broken weapon, a relic of the past. The war had shifted irreparably. No longer could Germany rely on technological innovation to turn the tide. It was no longer about the best tank or the best weapon. It was about numbers, logistics, and industrial output areas where Germany was now hopelessly outclassed. The M26 Pershing was not just a tank, it was a symbol of the Allied victory. A victory built not on single, perfect machines, but on the industrial might that could produce such machines in quantities the enemy could never hope to match. The myth of the Tiger I, once an invincible beast on the battlefield, collapsed with a single 90mm shot, and with that, Germany's hopes of victory began to fade. The battlefield at Cologne was littered with the wreckage of once feared tanks, but the legacy of the M26 Pershing had already been written. For Germany, the loss of the Tiger I was more than just the destruction of a tank. It was the death of a myth. The once invincible German tank had been shattered in the face of an American tank designed not for individual superiority, but for industrial might, mass production, and sheer durability. The Pershing's victory was a reminder to the Germans that technological superiority alone could not win a war. It was the ability to adapt, innovate, and replace losses that truly determined the outcome of a conflict. The Tiger I had been the face of German tank design, a machine that inspired both fear and awe across Europe. But in the final months of the war, it became a symbol of Germany's failure to adapt to the realities of total war. As the Allies flooded Europe with increasingly better-equipped forces, the Tiger was simply too few and too difficult to maintain. The M26 Pershing, on the other hand, was mass-produced and could be replaced as quickly as it was destroyed. What the Tiger I lacked in numbers, the Pershing made up for in versatility and the ability to overwhelm the enemy. The legacy of the Pershing and its victory over the Tiger I marked the shift in tank warfare. No longer was it about having the best tank. Now it was about having the best numbers and being able to adapt quickly to changing circumstances. The Pershing proved that, even with a superior tank, the true power of the Allies lay in their ability to produce weapons of war in vast quantities, maintain supply lines, and outlast the enemy's diminishing resources. The Tiger I, once a symbol of Germany's military might, became a symbol of what happens when technological superiority is not supported by the ability to sustain a war effort. For the U.S. Army, the Pershing's victory was just another step in a series of hard-fought battles that led to the ultimate Allied triumph in Europe. The Pershing would go on to become a part of the U.S. Army's strategic legacy. It was a weapon that proved the adaptability of the American industrial war machine, which could produce new and effective tanks like the M26 on an unprecedented scale. The Pershing, along with other American tanks like the Sherman, became the backbone of Allied armored forces, bringing about the eventual defeat of Nazi Germany. The destruction of the Tiger I by the Pershing did not just mark the end of an era for Germany, it also marked the end of the belief in German technological supremacy in tank warfare. While the Tiger I had been considered a game-changer in its prime, it was ultimately outpaced by the relentless pace of the war, and more importantly, by the United States' ability to mass-produce more advanced machines of war. In the face of overwhelming numbers and logistical support, even the Tiger I could not survive. The war would continue, but the fate of the German tank forces had been sealed. Germany was already on the defensive in the winter of 1944, 1945, and the collapse of the Tiger myth was symbolic of the broader collapse of German military power. The M26 Pershing's victory over the Tiger I was not just a tactical win, it was a strategic turning point. It heralded the final phase of the war, where Germany could no longer rely on its technological prowess alone to hold off the superior industrial capacity of the Allies.